Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Brian Beisel. I'm here for our Bible study video. It's going to hopefully be a shorter one. I said that last week and it was like 15 minutes. But this is from Luke. This is Luke 8, verses 22 to 25. And this is Luke's account of Jesus' stilling of the storm, the calming of the storm. So I'm going to read it first, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit and try to parse some of this out. I think there's a real important message here that is also very apropos to our time. So, one day he got into a boat with the disciples, and he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they put out. And while they were sailing, he fell asleep. A gale swept down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in danger. They went to him and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves. They ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" And they were afraid and amazed and said to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" The reading ends here. So I want to talk about control. I want to talk about control. You know, we're in a time right now where a lot is not under our control. We're not supposed to leave our houses unless we're supposed to. Some counties will be opening up this week. I live in Northumberland County, which on May 8th is supposed to open up to yellow, which actually, from my vantage point, doesn't change a whole lot. It says about restaurants being open curbside. Well, they've been. I don't know if there's a ton of difference between the yellow and our current situation, but does get us into green, which then we do see some further transitions. And, there are some people who are really upset at the way this was handled. I'm going to say this, I think all across the board, I don't want to judge people too negatively because when I was a pastor, I am a pastor. When I was training to be a pastor, that's what I meant to say. When I was training to be a pastor, believe it or not, they had no class that they presented that taught you how to deal with a pandemic as a pastor. We're in uncharted territory here. We are absolutely in uncharted territory. This is a weird thing, and hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and hopefully something that we'll be telling people about years down the road, and people will be thinking, well, how could that be? A lot like when I was a kid and my grandmother would talk to me about the Depression, the Great Depression. And even her, she grew up, she was born in 1935, so really she only really remembers the tail end of that. But I think both, even that scenario, there's an idea of control. And in our 21st century teaching and understanding, we're people who are accustomed to having things our way, to being in control. And we're even taught like that's a virtue in our country, independence. Part of how we understand independence is having control. And so here we have a story in Luke's gospel where Jesus is in control, and he is simply with the disciples at the beginning. Now, this is also told in other gospels. It's told, for example, in the Gospel of Mark, which gives us a little more detail. Luke is more interested in just giving us the basic facts of this. But I need to say this. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus comes off a little more curmudgeonly about the whole thing. Although, in Luke, he's not all that happy that they woke him up. I want to pay attention to that. Jesus is not really all that happy that the disciples woke him up. He's there in the boat, and he's asleep. And we're told that then the disciples realize they're in danger. They're taking on some water as they cross the lake. And the winds are raging, and the waves are coming up, and they're fearing for their lives. But the idea is, what if they didn't wake Jesus up? Maybe they still would have made it. Maybe they would have been a little more wetter, but maybe they still would have made it and been okay. Jesus' anger and frustration with them waking him up kind of points to that. You had to wake me up. You had to actually get me up here so I can literally just calm this thing down in front of you so that you feel okay. You would have been okay anyway, but no, you had to make demands of me. And then he questions their faith. So here's where I think I need to say that in the Gospels, when we read these stories, we're not supposed to put ourselves in the person of Jesus. We're not supposed to put ourselves on the side of Jesus. We're not Christ, right? That whole marketing campaign that happened when I was in college, WWJD, what would Jesus do? That's an unfair thing to put on us. We're not Jesus. We're not the Son of God. What would Jesus do? No, that's not where we're supposed to put ourselves. We're supposed to put ourselves in the personhood of the disciples. And so the disciples, in the middle of their consternation and their fear, they panic. And so here's what I wonder. Why isn't it good enough for them that Jesus is simply the presence of God that abides with them, that is with us? After all, that's the very meaning of Jesus' name. God is with us, right? Why can't we trust that? Why do we constantly have to take matters into our own hands? And maybe do things and wrestle for power, wrestle for control in ways that I think probably displease God. And you can see that played out in every facet of human history. Why? Because we are creatures of fear. Interestingly enough, I posted something late last night, early this morning, in which I said I'm a little afraid about us opening up. And I'm going to be honest. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm sharing my concern. There's a part of me that's very glad that we're getting close to those things, because there are certain things that I've definitely missed in my life. As my calling as a pastor, I've missed worship. I've missed leading worship. I've missed planning worship. I've missed those streams and those phases of life in the church, because everything's kind of felt the same day in and day out. We've all been going through that on some level. But there's a part of me that's also very concerned. Last night it was at Dollar General because we ran out of milk. I had to run down and get some milk. So I grabbed a gallon of milk. That'll last us for most of this week. And seemed like there was a big block party going on in downtown Shamokin, and nobody had masks on, and social distancing really wasn't happening. And, everybody kind of was like, oh, we're out here and we know we're going to get opened up on the 8th. So let's just celebrate that now. And it felt a little premature. And I'm thinking, and there's fear behind this. Yes, let me say that. There is fear behind this. And that fear is, well, who here works at a nursing home? Those are really being hit hard. Matter of fact, there were a couple in this county, a couple of nursing homes in Northumberland County that were just discovered to have notable cases of COVID-19. Who here works? That's a big employer in this area. Certainly somebody did. Are they being careful at work? If they're being that cavalier here in the intersection of Market Street and Independence Street in Shamokin, are they being just as cavalier at work? Are they really wearing their face masks? Why do so many people have a hard time wearing a face mask? I've seen people get upset and angry about that. And it's just a little piece of thing around your mouth. It's supposed to be a protective measure, more for the other person than for you. But we have that sense of independence. We want to do what we want, regardless of what others tell us. It's part of the human condition. And so, yeah, part of me is scared. Maybe I won't get it. Maybe I'm asymptomatic. Maybe I already have it. Who knows? But what happens? There is fear in that, and I want to say this: fear is a human thing. If you're telling me you don't have fear, I'm sorry, you're lying. We all have fear about something, right? Because on the other side, I wonder about this. Is there fear about us not opening up in a time that in which we can recover economically? Is there fear in that? I absolutely there is. There's fear there too. There is fear on both sides of the issue, regardless of how you want to cut that. There's fear. And we wrestle with the fact that, yes, the Bible tells us to not be afraid. But I'm going to say that's like telling a fish to not live in water. Fear is a great motivator in many different ways. The good news we have is that Jesus meets their fear. And here's the thing. We have to trust, because we don't have the earthly Jesus with us like the disciples did. We have to trust that we have God abiding with us in the midst of our panic, in the midst of our outrage, in the midst of all of those things we go through. We have to trust that God abides with us. I do, you do, we all do. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we all do a better job of that sometimes rather than others. One of the things that I'm wrestling with is part of if you want to know something I'm afraid about, is what this is doing long-term to my son's development. My son has sensory issues. It's part of his journey. It's part of who he is. Maybe I shouldn't reveal that on a YouTube video, but there you go. And this long-term isolation, what does that do to him? What does that do to people who need those? We're social creatures. There's a lot of fear in all of this. And in the midst of this, we have a God who abides with us. So we're called to trust, even though we all have a hard time trusting. We can't trust the people who are around us. And we're called to trust a God that we can't see, hear, touch, or feel, at least in a dexterous way. It's risky, right? It's risky. But we take with us the idea that God truly does abide with us. And I wonder if God's attitude towards us is not a little unlike Jesus. These people again, these disciples, they can't just trust me. They have to get me up. And here's the thing. We understand as Lutherans, Jesus as 100% divine, also 100% human. So that human frustration, Jesus understands that and knows that. That's a part of what's going on with him. So just like a parent that is frustrated with their child, that you're trying to teach them a certain lesson and they're just not getting it, and they're doing the same thing over and over again, and you're thinking, why can't you listen to me? I think God's like that with us, because we see that in the incarnation of Christ in this story. But the important part, Jesus sticks with them. So God sticks with us. God sticks with us. So I want you to take that with you, that idea that God sticks with you through those storms and through those challenging times, and we're all collectively going through that challenge together. And I want you to think about that in the midst of your schedule and your life and your routine and all of those things that you're trying to do to try to have some semblance of normalcy. Today is May the 4th. May the 4th is sometimes called Star Wars Day. One of my normalcy, I'm wearing a shirt with Chewbacca on it right now. Yeah. It makes me think about some good things there. We need that. And somewhere in that process, God is active. So just as God abides with you, let us all abide with each other and stick through this together, supporting each other and loving each other all the way. That's going to end the Bible study for today. Hey, I cut it at 14 minutes. Still longer than I wanted it, but hopefully you all got something usable out of this. We'll be back later this week. Just a reminder that our church hangout this week is on Wednesday rather than Tuesday. It's on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, and I'll be sending out information about that later. So thank you very much and have a great day. God bless.